Hi, and welcome back to Gardner Camp. Today we're going to talk about kayaking. We're going to talk about kayak safety. We're going to talk about what to look for in the store if you're going to buy your own kayak and how much they cost. And we're also going to go over some paddling strokes and some onshore instructions to get ready to go on your kayaking trip. Historically, this area was covered with water. If you remember, the river spanned from bluff to bluff. So the Native Americans had to travel around to hunt, to fish, to find shelter. They had to use some type of a boat. So a lot of times they used canoes or different types of boating vessels that they made on their own. Now Lewis and Clark, when they were exploring west, they also used dugout canoes. So they would look for cottonwood trees and they would dig out the middle of that cottonwood tree and use those as canoes to get around the wetland areas. They actually have 15 of them on their westward expedition. So that's pretty cool. We have a lot of cottonwood trees that live around the river area, and that's what they would look for, and they would cut those down and dig them out and use them to haul their cargo. Before we go on our kayaking trip, we need to make sure that we are prepared with the proper items. So there are two things that you have to have with you when you're on a kayak that are the law to have with you. And one of them is a whistle. You need to have some type of noise signaling device in case of an emergency. And the second thing you have to have is a life jacket. So a life jacket and a whistle are required by law. Now, if you were kayaking at night, you would have to also have a light, some type of a light source so that people can see you when you're out on the water. Other optional items that you'll probably want to take with you are things like a water bottle, in case you get thirsty. You also need some type of a dry bag. Ziplocs are just fine for dry bags so that you can put whatever you need to in there. You also might want to take some bug spray with you to stay comfortable. You need to put on some sunscreen before you get out in the water, because when you are in the water, it's a lot more reflective and you'll get sunburnt very quickly out there. So sunscreen is important. You also want to put some type of hat protection on your head, because again, that sun is beating down on you. So a Gardner Camp hat would be perfect for you to wear out on your kayak. And last, sometimes when you're out on the water, you get wet. Water might splash up on you. When you're paddling, it might fall down and run down your arms. So you want to make sure that you take with you some clothing that's a little bit warmer than what you have on. So what I have here is just a light rain jacket. In case you get caught out in a storm, you have rain protection, but also some warmth in case you do get cold, you get wet, and then you get a little bit cold later on. And one important thing to do, this is what you need to take with you, but before you go on your kayaking trip, you need to make sure that you tell someone where you're going. So tell your mom, tell your dad, tell any type of friend where you're going to take off and how long you think you're going to be out there, and then what time you're going to be back. So that's really important to check in with somebody before you go. After you have given your paddling plan to someone else and they know where you're going to go, you need to check the 3 W's: weather, wind, and waves. So check your weather forecast during the time period that you're going to be out here. Make sure there's not going to be any pop-up storms that might pop up on you while you're out there. Check the wind speed. So if it's anywhere under 11 miles an hour, it is good for basic beginner kayakers to go ahead and go out there and kayak, regardless of what the wind direction is. Wind obviously is going to make a lot more waves. So the wavier it is out there on the water, there's more chance that you can tip over or have other types of, safety emergencies happen to you. All right, let's talk a little bit about paddles. So kayak paddles have 2 blades. A canoe paddle just has 1 blade. This is the blade portion, this white portion here of a kayak paddle. The middle portion that is black is the shaft. So we have 2 blades, 1 shaft. Now, an interesting part about a kayak blade is that there's a scooping side and an outer side. when you are holding your kayak paddle, you want to make sure you are scooping the water backwards like an ice cream scoop. So when you put your paddle together, you want to make sure both scooping sides of your paddle are pointed backwards so you can scoop the water to the back portion of the kayak. Now, we also have some drip rings right here. They're just little gadgets so that the water off of the blade doesn't come down and run onto your hands. Grip of your paddle. So when you get into your kayak, you don't want to hold your paddle like this or some other type of funky way. You want to make sure that you have your hands over top with your knuckles showing, and that you can reach forward and pull backward on both sides of you within the kayak. So paddle grip is very important as well. So paddle length is really important. When you are a youngster like yourself, a 190 centimeter paddle will be just fine for you. But I'll give you a chart here that shows how long your paddle should be based on how tall you are. So there are different lengths of paddles. They're in centimeters as far as the measurements in a store. So you want to pay attention to this chart to pick the right size paddle for your height. Okay, let's talk a little bit about our kayak. So this is a Viper kayak. It's 10 feet 4 inches long. It costs about $230 if you include the paddle. You can get other 10-foot kayaks for around that $250, $350 range for just basic beginner kayaks. Now our kayak here is a sit-in type of kayak. You get inside, your legs go underneath inside of the hull. There's also another type of kayak which is a sit-on-top type of kayak. So let's talk about the parts of our Gardner Camp kayaks. Every boat that you see has a bow and a stern. We're going to start with the bow portion, or the front part of our boat, on the right-hand side of this picture. On the bow, we have a carry handle that allows us to pull around our kayak while it's on land, which makes it very convenient to move around. Behind the carry handle, we have our hull. That's the inside of our boat where our legs go when we're sitting in the kayak. On the top of the hull are some deck lines. Those are elastic bands that we can put different types of things, a sweatshirt, whatever items you're carrying with you. You can conveniently stow them right there underneath the deck lines. Behind that, the edge of our cockpit is called the coaming. And of course, we have our cockpit that we sit inside on our seat. Behind the cockpit, we have a hatch. That hatch lid actually comes off, and we can stow items inside of that hatch to try to keep them dry. We also have some deck lines back there where we can put our items as well. And then finally, the back of our boat is called the stern. So these are the parts of our Gardner Camp kayaks. Today we learned all about the basics of kayaking. Tomorrow we're going to get out on our kayak on Truster Lake right here behind me. Now I'd like you to go online and figure out what your challenge is to get outside.